The decision to purchase an abandoned tiny house in a neighborhood of microplots wasn't just about affordability. It was about securing a future in a state where housing costs had skyrocketed beyond reason. The narrator, keen on homeownership but unwilling to take on a crushing mortgage, stumbled upon this neglected yet structurally sound tiny home at a foreclosure auction. The price was unbeatable, the location was acceptable, and despite the peeling paint and overgrown yard, the house had potential. Excited to finally have a place to call their own, the narrator immediately set to work cleaning up the space, envisioning cozy interiors, a lush little garden, and a financial future unburdened by rent or oversized mortgage payments. However, their excitement was short-lived. A neighbor, who fit the stereotype of aKaren, with an air of entitlement and an obsessive need to control the neighborhood, stormed over within days of the narrator's arrival. She insisted that the tiny house had been functioning as her personal storage unit for years and that she had every right to reclaim what was inside. Confused and caught off guard, the narrator refused, pointing out that all previous owners' rights had been extinguished at foreclosure. Karen, however, was relentless. She called the police, spun a sob story about sentimental belongings, and when that didn't work, she escalated to a full-blown lawsuit, demanding either the return of her supposed possessions or compensation for their rather than caving to the absurdity of Karen's claims. The narrator prepared for mediation with an unexpected weapon, Karen's own extensive list of property code violations. Through careful observation and a bit of research, they discovered that Karen's property was a disaster zone in the eyes of the local housing authority. Her front walkway was riddled with tripping hazards, her detached garage was falling apart with exposed wiring, and various other issues made her home a potential lawsuit waiting to happen. Armed with this information, the narrator entered mediation with a clear strategy. Either Karen dropped the case and allowed the tiny house's rightful owner to proceed unbothered, or they would file a counter-complaint with the city, ensuring Karen faced a mountain of citations and costly repairs. Backed into a corner, Karen begrudgingly withdrew her claims. Yet, even with the case resolved, she remained bitter, making passive-aggressive comments and throwing glares whenever she spotted the narrator outside. The victory, however, was sweet. The tiny house was officially and indisputably theirs, and they could now move forward with their dream of making it a beautiful and peaceful home. Although the lawsuit had been dropped, the tension between Karen and the narrator never fully dissipated. She remained a thorn in their side, glaring from across the street, occasionally making snide remarks about the unsightly renovation process, and even going so far as to lodge anonymous complaints about noise violations when the narrator had contractors working. But despite Karen's pettiness, the narrator refused to be discouraged. Instead, they poured their energy into transforming the tiny house into a cozy, charming sanctuary. They repainted the exterior in a cheerful hue, installed flower boxes, and laid down a small but lovely patio where they could sit with a morning cup of coffee. Over time, they planned to expand their efforts to the yard, planting climbing vines, vibrant flowers, and even a small vegetable garden. The vision of their perfect tiny home kept them focused, and while Karen's bitterness remained a background nuisance, it was nothing compared to the satisfaction of having a place they truly owned. Their story wasn't just about overcoming an obstacle. It was about standing firm against entitlement and creating a space that reflected their resilience and independence. While the tiny house saga was a battle over one modest home, another story unfolded across the ocean, centered around wealth, entitlement, and family expectations. The narrator in this case had long been successful in real estate investment, carefully purchasing properties and building a portfolio that ensured financial security. Recently, they had acquired a fifth property, a stunning home in France, a dream location that they had worked tirelessly to afford. However, what should have been a moment of celebration quickly spiraled into family drama when their brother and extended relatives reacted with outrage. Instead of congratulating them, the family accused them of selfishness, arguing that they should have used their wealth to fund the brother's dream home instead. The brother, a man who had never quite gotten his financial footing, had made poor decisions over the years, yet still felt entitled to a handout. The pressure was immense, with family members guilt-tripping the narrator about how much they already had, and how one more property wasn't necessary when their brother was struggling. However, the real reason for the brother's financial woes soon became clear. He had been secretly gambling away his savings, a habit that had drained every opportunity for stability. Despite the initial frustration and the feeling of being unfairly targeted, the narrator didn't outright dismiss their brother's plight. Instead, they offered a middle ground, a rent-to-own agreement. If the brother truly wanted homeownership, he could work for it, not by expecting a free handout, but by paying rent that would eventually contribute to ownership. This way, he would have a path to his dream home without irresponsibly squandering more money. Initially, the brother balked, upset that the property wasn't simply being gifted to him. The family, too, tried to argue that since the narrator could afford multiple homes, they should just help family out. But the narrator stood firm, knowing that an outright gift would do nothing but enable the brothers' poor financial habits. Eventually, after realizing that this was the only option, the brother reluctantly agreed to the rent-to-own deal. It wasn't the resolution he had wanted, but it was the only one that made sense. The narrator, while frustrated with their family's entitlement, knew they had made the right choice, helping without enabling, providing a way forward without being taken ad. In the world of retail, employees often encounter customers who try to manipulate policies to their advantage, sometimes to ridiculous extents. One such customer was Debbie, a woman who believed she had discovered a loophole to exploit during the busiest shopping weekend of the year, Black Friday. Debbie's scheme was simple. She had purchased several items at a high tax rate store location but realized that a nearby store had a slightly lower tax percentage due to jurisdictional differences. In an attempt to shave off a few dollars, she returned to the store demanding a full refund, planning to immediately repurchase the same items to benefit from the lower tax rate. While the store's policy technically allowed this, what Debbie failed to account for was the expiration of her Black Friday coupon upon refund. The coupon, which had given her a significant discount on the original purchase, was a one-time use promotion that could not be reapplied. The retail employee, fully aware of the outcome but adhering to Debbie's demands with a neutral expression, prop. The moment Debbie attempted to repurchase her items, she was informed that the coupon was no longer valid, and she would now have to pay full price. What should have been a minor tax savings ended up costing her significantly more, leaving her furious. The employee, feigning polite regret, simply reminded her that she had requested the return and there was nothing that could be done. With no recourse, Debbie begrudgingly repurchased her items at a higher cost than before, learning the hard way that trying to game the few things frustrate experienced employees more than micromanagement from incompetent superiors. This was exactly the situation a seasoned cook faced when a newly promoted manager, eager to assert authority, implemented an absurdly strict rule regarding rice preparation. The directive was simple yet ridiculous. The cook was to rinse the rice until the water ran completely clear. While rinsing rice is a standard practice to remove excess starch, achieving perfectly clear water is nearly impossible without extensive effort. The cook, knowing the futility of this demand but also recognizing an opportunity for malicious compliance, decided to follow instructions to the letter. With a deadpan expression, they began rinsing and kept rinsing. After 37 rounds of rinsing, the rice was completely ruined, its texture degraded to mush from excessive water exposure. When the manager, oblivious to the consequences of their own rule, saw the unusable batch of rice, they demanded an explanation. The cook, suppressing a smirk, simply stated that they had followed the order exactly as given. The restaurant had to delay meal service, and the manager, now humiliated, was forced to backtrack on the rule. While they never openly admitted fault, they never again micromanaged the cook's preparation process, proving that sometimes the best way to fight absurdity is to let it fail. Spectacular advancements are usually a cause for celebration, but in one marriage, a husband's promotion quickly became a catalyst for conflict. After securing a managerial position, he began to adopt an entitled attitude, treating his wife not as a partner but as a personal servant. Previously, they had shared household responsibilities equally, but with his newfound status, he expected a shift in dynamics, demanding absolute silence when he worked from home, hot meals waiting upon his arrival, and even back rubs at his whim. His wife, who also worked full-time, initially tried to be patient, hoping he would snap out of his self-absorbed phase. However, his expectations only escalated, reaching a breaking point one evening when he ordered her to fetch him ice cream after a long day. Exhausted from her own job, she finally refused, pointing out that they both worked full-time and that his promotion did not make her his personal assistant. The husband's shocked reaction revealed how deeply he had internalized his newfound sense of superiority, but the confrontation forced an overdue reckoning. She made it clear that if he wanted to act like a king, he'd have to start treating her like a queen. Whether the marriage survived this shift depended on his willingness to correct his behavior, but the wife had drawn her line in the sand. She was an equal, not a subordinate. There's a special kind of satisfaction that comes with seeing justice served, even if it's delivered in the pettiest of ways. This was the case for an individual who had been swindled by a shady developer. The narrator had paid a deposit for a construction project, only for the developer to suddenly disappear with their money, ghosting all attempts at communication. Furious but with no immediate legal recourse, the narrator could do nothing, until fate intervened. One day, they stumbled upon the developer's lost organizer, filled with important contacts, project notes, and what appeared to be crucial business information. Recognizing the opportunity for poetic justice, the narrator didn't hesitate. Instead of returning it or using it against the developer directly, they chose a more satisfying route. They trashed it. With one petty but deeply gratifying act, they ensured the developer would experience at least some level of inconvenience, scrambling to recover lost information. While it didn't reimburse the stolen deposit, it was a small, sweet taste of revenge that gave the narrator closure, knowing that karma had delivered at least a minor consequence to the scam artist. The confrontation between the narrator and Karen over the tiny house wasn't just a neighborhood dispute, it was a masterclass in tactical conflict resolution. While many people would have crumbled under the weight of a frivolous lawsuit, the narrator took a strategic approach, flipping the power dynamic in their favor. By meticulously documenting Karen's numerous property violations, they turned the tables, presenting her with a choice: either drop the lawsuit or face a legal and financial headache of her own. This wasn't just about winning, it was about demonstrating the power of knowledge and preparation in legal disputes. Too often, people assume they can weaponize bureaucracy to bully others, but this story proved that with the right strategy, even an underdog can emerge victorious. Karen may have walked away bitter, but the narrator walked away with their home intact, a testament to the effectiveness of leveraging legal pressure in the face of baseless claim. Money has a way of exposing the true dynamics within a family, especially when expectations clash with reality. In the case of the narrator who had accumulated wealth through smart property investments, their success was seen not as personal achievement but as a family resource to be tapped into. When they purchased their fifth property in France, instead of congratulations, they were met with accusations of selfishness. The family, particularly the brother, insisted that instead of indulging in another home, the narrator should have used that money to fund the brother's dream home. However, beneath this seemingly noble request lay a deeper issue. The brother had a gambling addiction that had drained his finances. The family, either in denial or willfully ignorant, refused to acknowledge that his misfortune was self-inflicted. Instead, they sought an easy fix, demanding that the more successful sibling shoulder the burden. The narrator, while empathetic to their brother's situation, recognized that enabling him financially would only perpetuate the cycle of irresponsibility. The backlash was intense, with guilt-tripping, emotional manipulation, and even subtle threats of estrangement, but they stood their ground. It wasn't just about the money, it was about self-respect, financial autonomy, and refusing to be punished for making retail employees witness all kinds of customer antics, but few moments are as satisfying as watching a manipulative shopper's scheme blow up in their face. Debbie, convinced she had found a way to cheat the system, attempted to exploit a tax discrepancy between two store locations. Her plan: return her Black Friday purchases at one store and rebuy them at another, pocketing the small tax difference. What she didn't realize was that her once-in-a-lifetime Black Friday coupon would not carry over upon return. The moment the transaction was finalized, Debbie's precious discount vanished, forcing her to either repurchase at full price or leave empty-handed. The retail employee, who had foreseen this outcome, remained professionally neutral, letting Debbie's frustration boil over as she realized her mistake. What was meant to be a victory over the system turned into an embarrassing and costly blunder, proving that greed and entitlement often lead to self-inflicted wounds. Watching a customer's smug confidence evaporate in real time? That was the true Black Friday deal of the day. Nothing exposes an incompetent manager faster than their inability to grasp the basics of the job they oversee. In a busy restaurant kitchen, efficiency is everything, but that didn't stop one overzealous manager from derailing the workflow with an absurd new rule. Insisting that rice be rinsed until the water was crystal clear, they set an impossible standard, oblivious to the fact that rice never fully releases all its starch. The cook, seasoned in both culinary skill and workplace politics, saw an opportunity for malicious compliance. Instead of arguing, they followed the directive exactly. 37 washes later, the rice had turned into a ruined, waterlogged mess. Meal service was delayed, orders backed up, and the manager, realizing their mistake too late, had no choice but to abandon the rule entirely. While they never admitted they were wrong, they learned a critical lesson: expertise matters, and arbitrary power plays often backfire spectacularly. The cook, meanwhile, continued their work with quiet satisfaction, knowing they had subtly yet effectively put the manager in their place. Promotion should be a cause for celebration, but in this household, it became the catalyst for entitlement. A husband, newly elevated to a managerial position, decided that his professional success meant he no longer had to contribute at home. Once an equal partner, He now expected his wife to handle all domestic tasks while he basked in his deserved relaxation. He demanded silence when working, hot meals at the ready, and even nightly backrubs, despite his wife working the same long hours as him. For a while, she complied, hoping he would snap out of it, but when he took his entitlement to new heights, demanding ice cream while she was exhausted, she reached a breaking point. Her firm refusal shattered his illusion of dominance, forcing him to confront the reality that a promotion did not make him a king. Whether he learned from the experience or not, the wife had drawn a firm line: mutual respect or nothing. The incident wasn't just about ice cream, it was about the deeper imbalance in their marriage, and whether he would rise to the occasion or crumble under his own arrogance. If there was one common thread weaving through all these stories, it was the concept of karmic justice. Whether it was Karen trying to steal a tiny house, a greedy brother demanding financial bailouts, or a manager enforcing an impossible rule, every entitled individual faced their comeuppance in one form or another. Karen's attempt to manipulate the legal system backfired when she found herself facing property code violations. The brother who expected a free house was forced into a rent-to-own agreement, proving that responsibility couldn't be dodged forever. Debbie, the cunning customer, ended up paying more than she initially planned, turning her brilliant tax loophole into a costly mistake. And the overbearing manager? They had to eat their own words when their rigid enforcement led to disaster. These stories serve as a reminder that entitlement, when left unchecked, often leads to self-inflicted downfall. Whether through legal maneuvers, petty revenge, or simple malicious compliance, the universe has a way of balancing the scales, one way or another.